A musician,
a long-distance kayaker,
a businessman,
she looks after animals,
artist,
author.
We interview remarkable people.
They're talented in so many different areas.
You're listening to The Dialogue.
89.7 FM Eastside Radio.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Emlyn Scott, who is an entrepreneur and the co-founder and executive chairman of Capital Pitch. Now, Emlyn, welcome to the studio. And we've had a fantastic chat. You were born in Melbourne and you have 4 brothers. There's 4 of you, 4 boys.
Yes.
And very, very competitive family.
Indeed. Yep.
Brothers are brilliant at sport. You're brilliant at sport. High academic achievers. Do you think that set the tone for you achieving through your life?
I don't know whether it set the tone, but you either step up or you get kind of squashed. But having much older brothers, so you just get on with getting on, and you just do what you can.
I read an article that said that you get your IQ from your mother. Is your mother bright?
She would say she's not,
right.
But I would say streetwise.
Okay.
Definitely. So she's been hugely successful herself. But my father was the high academic achiever.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that article was wrong. You are the co-founder of Capital Pitch. Now, Capital Pitch, you explained to me, was a marketplace, which is lovely, but says nothing to me about what Capital Pitch is. So I think I need you to give me a little bit of a description.
Sure. So Capital Pitch brings great companies and sources great companies that need to raise capital, gets them ready, gets the investors to invest in those businesses, and from the investor's point of view, sources those great companies so they can invest into them. So we're trying to fix a problem between both sides of that marketplace.
You mentioned that your father died when you were 8?
Yes, after 4 years of battling cancer. So, a hugely traumatic time for all of us, and for me, that time when I went off the rails.
And when you say off the rails, what does off the rails mean?
Well, suffered academically, so you don't turn up to school, you're not focused, you're lashing out because you're seeking attention, as kids do, especially at a young age, and you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing, from vandalizing stuff to just not being the good kid that you should be.
How did you come right?
I think 2 parts. My mother was just very solid, and at time you realise that you're not doing the right thing. Your moral compass is going, hang on, this isn't right. And then she also remarried, and to a great person who later on adopted all of us. And again, he had the right moral compass, and spent a lot of time working, especially on me, to bring me around.
So it's a fantastic story, because you have a brother who's 16 months older than you, who is mentally challenged, and you spent quite a lot of time with that brother, obviously being quite close in age. So you had a stepfather who came along and took on 3 boys who were high achievers and, I imagine, big personalities, and a child that was mentally challenged as well. He must be quite an extraordinary human being.
Phenomenal, and great at business as well. And we have to be thankful almost every day, because of what he's done for us and what he sacrificed to come in and do that for all of us. I don't know too many people that would take that on.
Your brother, you said, has taught you quite a lot about humility and also being humble, because you said one of the things is that you realize how lucky you are.
Yeah, I mean, when you're one of 4 boys and for no particular reason one of you doesn't come out right, then you've got to look at and reflect on yourself and go, I was lucky that it wasn't me, and so that has to teach you a level of humility, and just thank that you're absolutely normal, and unfortunately someone just wasn't. And so you need to stick up for that weaker person.
So Capital Pitch, interestingly enough, I asked you about whether or not that influence from your brother has influenced your life, and you said actually you feel that doing Capital Pitch and putting startups together with investors actually is about helping people. It's about getting people into a business environment that they maybe wouldn't have had a chance at before. What is about that process of capital raising and you actually sort of matchmaking that excites you?
Yeah, it is a form of Cupid, absolutely. So I think it goes back to fairness and honesty, because investors want to help generally. I mean, it's not just a matter of putting dollars in and hoping that you make a whole lot of money. It is about that, but at the same time, if you can do that and there's good that comes out of that at the same time, then that's fantastic. So for me, helping the businesses that are growing, they're employing, they're paying taxes, they're producing great products or services that help society. So the ability to bring both of those together and help foster a relationship and make it, I suppose, smoother, is hugely satisfying. It makes me want to jump out of the bed every morning and actually get it going.
You went to university and did, as I said, you've done 4 degrees. You started off with, what did you start off with? Let's go, because it's kind of out of my realm of experience. So let's let you list them for us.
Yeah, so I did a Bachelor of Economics initially with a triple major, and then a graduate diploma in Applied Finance and Investment. A few years later, then an MBA, and then straight after that, a Chartered Financial Analyst, a CFA designation.
Did you always want to be in finance? Did you always want to be around that type of environment? I mean, the first thing I think about, you said that you went and you were a trader. I just instantly think of The Wolf of Wall Street. You said it was nothing like that, but
it was for some.
What was it?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
some people were living that life.
Oh, it's crazy. I started on the floor of the Sydney Futures Exchange, where you have the jackets and everybody's screaming at each other.
Oh, really? How old were you?
I was 21
Wow.
when I started that. So I think I spent the first year with that many mouth ulcers in my mouth from the stress that every time I spoke, I could taste blood. It was pretty intense. The pressure was just unbelievable at that point in time. And then slowly you start to strengthen up and go, hang on, I can do this. Because you're trying to remember so many numbers and everybody's got such a big ego. And there was one point about a year in that I was being picked on by the pit boss effectively, and you're always picking on the weakest in there. And so you've got a yellow badge, so you're still a junior, and I lost it. I mean, I just went mental. And because I was doing martial arts and stuff, you can see, if they ever go back to the video, you'll see me running through the pit with people diving on top of me as I'm going to kill this guy. And he fell off the back of the pit. And then a week later, I got full trading status.
Oh, really?
And they were saying, we're pushing you until finally you snapped and stood up for yourself. And so it took me 12 months.
Before you put the pit bull over the pit.
Yeah.
Quite literally. But you hated trading. You said I think you told me about 6 times that it just so wasn't for you.
Well, I went from trading on the floor, which I did for 2 years, and then I went up into the dealing room and did that for the following 4 years. So I ran the Commonwealth Bank's short interest rate options book, and it's fascinating on one hand, but at the same time for me it was just paper shuffling. So I didn't enjoy it, and it was hugely long hours. So literally 24 hours a day. I used to have to wake up every couple of hours during the night to re-hedge the book through US time zones. And you go, well, what have I achieved? What have I actually produced? Well, nothing. And for me, that just wasn't enough. And so I didn't enjoy it. So after, I think, sort of 6 or 7 years of that was enough for me.
Enough of that with the mouth ulcers. You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue, where I interview remarkable people. Today on the show I have Emlyn Scott, entrepreneur and co-founder and executive chairman of Capital Pitch. Now, you went from you actually collapsed at some point through this sort of the challenges that you had. When did this collapse happen?
Yeah, I think I just turned 25, and I just came into work. I mean, I was pushing myself pretty hard, not just at work, but doing sport, and not eating well, and I wasn't being particularly clever with all of that. And so, I felt awful, went home, and literally was just sick day in, day out for about 3 or 4 days. Couldn't eat, couldn't hold anything down. Parents came, picked me up, took me, to their place to kind of look after me. And after I think it was the 3rd or 4th day of not eating and just, throwing up, my mother came to me just before, going to bed and said, I'll see you in the morning. I was just sort of lying on the couch. And it's weird to go from being so strong to so weak. I sort of looked at her and I said, actually, I don't think I'm going to be alive tomorrow morning. And so they sort of went, oh, okay,
my goodness,
this isn't good. And so my father came down and the two of them kind of hobbled me to, well, we're actually water access only, my parents' place. So they kind of dragged me down the jetty to the speedboat and took me off to the hospital. And in the hospital it kind of went from bad to worse. You
have meningitis.
So meningitis and pneumonia. I think it was from pollution in the surf or something happened a few days before that. And they literally gave me a couple of hours to live. And I sort of, obviously, it was a reflection point of going, well, obviously what I'm doing is not working. I can't keep doing it this hard. And so I took a bit of a break and started to plan the next step of my life.
Martial arts is something that's been quite important for you, and you've sort of embarked on work, on it quite seriously at one point. Why martial arts? I mean, other than the need to bash up your brothers and do it really well, what is it about the martial arts philosophy that you like?
I liked the discipline of it, and I love being fit and doing sport. And the concept of going to the gym, I hated, because just running on a treadmill is just deadly boring to me. So the ability to do sport while you're doing something fun, like surfing or martial arts and learning, is something that's massively attractive for me. And I like the idea of being able to defend myself if push came to shove. So never as an instigator, but definitely as a defensive tool. And I enjoyed it. And then you start to build a camaraderie with the people that you're doing it with. And as you get better, it's the discipline of being able to control your body and do unusual things with it is amazingly satisfying.
You went into it quite sort of seriously. You were telling me about the black suit and the white suit. Just explain a little bit to me about that. The black ninja and the white ninja.
Yeah, literally, it was a bit like that. I used to love it because normally, the suit you wear is white, but in Hapkido it's black. And we used to love it. So especially if you're a black belt, you got black on black, which is pretty cool. So it's about the closest thing you get to being a ninja. Maybe a kind of bit odd, maybe a reflection. But we loved it. But then there's another version of that martial art which uses the white suit that I did later on and went through that process as well.
You lived in the UK for a while, quite a while actually.
Yeah.
And you went to Edinburgh to actually do one of your degrees, and you lived there. What was it about the UK that kind of drew you, and what did you do while you were there?
So I was drawn either to the UK or to the US because both of them were financial centres, but I had ancestry for the UK, so that made it nice and easy for me. So I went over to London, did work there for a year, saved up pounds because the exchange rate was pretty bad to be able to pay for the MBA, and then went up to Edinburgh to study. And I checked out Edinburgh and Cambridge and a couple of other universities to do the degree. And Edinburgh, I loved it. It was great. I thought it was kind of ironic that I leave a city like Sydney that's got 3 or 4 million people, and I end up in a city that's got 500,000, and 10% of them are students. So I've gone to see the big wide world and ended up in a tiny little corner of it. But I loved it. It was it is a bitterly cold place. I think if it had good weather, it'd be the most beautiful place on the planet. And I enjoyed it. I lived it right on the Royal Mile, which is the old part of Edinburgh. I used to wake up to bagpipers busking every morning, which is fine unless you got a hangover.
Yep.
That's really brutal. But it's just a magical place. It was a lovely time of my life.
And from the point of view of work in the UK, what were you involved in?
So when I initially got over there, I contracted for a while in again doing options derivatives work, and that's where I started to move from sort of the interest rate side over to equity side. And then when I went up to Edinburgh, I started as a fund manager, and then came up with an idea of what they call a combined order book, which no one had done before. And that's where I was matching mismatch contracts, so literally taking a derivative and matching against an equity product. And so I kicked off a project to do that, got the backing of a huge company, and then like all things all roads lead back to London, and I ended up back down there working for LCH ClearNet, which is the largest independent clearinghouse in the world, and they brought me in to take this idea and make it happen, which took me 9 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so
did it happen?
It did in form, certainly not as it was originally designed, and it taught me a huge amount about business development, and that was my journey to actually building things, which I enjoyed doing. I just need to do it a little bit faster than that time. So
9 years, yeah, that's a while.
Yeah.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Emlyn Scott, who is an entrepreneur and the co-founder and executive chairman of Capital Pitch. When you came back to Australia, you actually went and worked for the National Stock Exchange, which is... You were kind of brought in to do that, and it's a great story. So I'm going to let you kind of tell that story because it's quite fun. So you arrived back, and how did you land up with that job?
Yeah, so I came back and decided to take the first 12 months off, settle my family in here, and we moved up to Pittwater, which is a place that I'd grown up in at one point in my life, and it's just a magical place in Sydney. And I started to network here and got introduced into the National Stock Exchange, which was being taken over at that point in time. And they asked me whether I wanted to run it. And I thought, well, who at 40 gets to run a publicly listed company in an exchange? So I'll certainly have a go at that. And I was completely out of my depth. I had no idea what I was doing. But you go in there and you try and pick it apart and start with the basics and go, what do we do well? What do we not do well? What does the market want? What does the market not want? And see where the differences are between the two and see what's low-lying fruit, what you can do that's relatively easy that's going to make a big impact. And you just start chipping away at one thing after another to make it better.
Capital Pitch, Capital Pitch involves the open markets as well. So, I mean, just tell me a little bit about this Capital Pitch product that you've got, this marketplace. I mean, let's kind of clarify exactly what's going on in that.
Yeah, it's like most things I do. I kind of over-engineer things.
Right.
So it's been
no
it's
wonder
been a
it's
lot
quite
of work.
hard for me to ask these questions.
Yeah.
I'm going, okay, now just explain Capital Pitch to
Yeah.
me. I did try and work it out. Thought I'd have several questions, but actually just one question.
Yeah, it's like, why can't I do anything simple for a change? But no, what we designed there, and credit to the team for all they've done to help make Capital Pitch what it is now, is that we combined three things, and we found that just capital raising unto itself doesn't really work. So you get a business, you've got to look at it and say, is it worthy of capital, and are the investors protected? And you can't do that without checking out the business itself. But then as soon as you do that, what you realize is the businesses themselves don't know how to raise capital. And so you need to then take a step back further and go, actually, we've got to look at you and get you investor ready. And then once you're investor ready, then we can do due diligence on you and analyze you. Then we can take you out to investors. And so what we did is create a pathway so we can take a business from the moment I'm thinking of raising capital all the way through to here's the check, and systemize that whole process, which hasn't been done before.
Raising capital for businesses is a very tricky minefield for an enormous number of people. I mean, the idea of going out and getting capital for your business for some people is a no-brainer. They go, this is what I want to do. There are lots of people who are completely anti the idea. They would never give away any of their business. They'd rather build it organically. And then there's a whole lot of investors out there who, some of them smart, I guess, some of them not that smart. But I also think the Australian environment for capital raising is quite immature.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Australia is, especially if you speak to people from Silicon Valley or from Israel, we'll say we're 20 years behind them. And we're quite isolated here. So we think that we're really ahead and we're really doing things, but it's not till you go overseas and realize actually how far you are behind. And Australia has a generation of property investors and even stock investors, and the concept of startup is put alongside horse racing, and it's not. And what I try and emphasize to investors and get across to them is that if you invest in anything you don't understand, that is gambling. But if you know what you're doing, it's not. So the idea here is that we've got to take good products out to the investors and explain to them that it's a diversification tool, that it's not all or nothing, and that this ability to invest in startups, if you do it correctly, is actually very lucrative. When
you say it's very lucrative, why? Why would it be more lucrative than, say, investing in a house or investing in something else? I mean, there's such a huge risk attached to it.
Well, there is if you don't know what you're doing. You're absolutely right. And of course, anything is risky if you put all of it in one place, so you don't do that. But it's very lucrative because startups have some interesting structures that allow you to make an extraordinary return if you're very good. So first of all, there's tax advantages for investing in startups. So they can be tax-free for capital gains and any income for a 10-year period. Secondly, if you're investing in say, a stock, you're not allowed to invest in anything where there's inside information.
Okay.
But if you invest in a startup, that's all you're doing.
Right.
So it's not illegal to have inside scoops on what's going on. Startups allow you to have enormous returns. You can invest a couple of $100,000, and there's stories of that from US investors where they've invested like that and invested in Google or Facebook.
And LinkedIn and all of them, and just made an absolute mozza.
Absolutely. You can't do that on any other asset class. So it's got a unique structure that no other asset class has. So it's not a mutually exclusive thing. You don't do house investing or startup investing.
You do a bit of both.
You do a bit of both, absolutely.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Emlyn Scott, who is an entrepreneur and the co-founder and executive chairman of Capital Pitch. Do you think that we have sexy enough startups in Australia that are going to be big enough to make it interesting?
Definitely. There's some amazing startups here, and the ecosystem is getting more and more sophisticated by the day, which is extraordinary to see. So I've got to witness it probably over the last sort of 4 to 5 years, and the change over that period where I was having to raise capital for my previous company before Capital Pitch to where it is now is chalk and cheese. And there are a lot of companies that aren't worthy of capital that are still getting funded, but that's the nature of startup. You don't get, they don't always get it right, and it's who you're connected to in a large extent. But there's some amazing companies here. It's there's still the investor side of the equation that needs a lot more growth.
From my experience and from talking to quite a lot of people, I think there's a perception that the investor community is quite negative about and the capital raising houses like yours and a whole lot of others. I'm not saying specifically yours, but there are quite a lot of them out there. Blackbird and you can list quite a few, are quite negative about new startups, and it's very hard to get to get in front of them. I mean, I know one in particular who says that if you don't know somebody who knows us, we won't see you. So you have to find a warm introduction, which actually turns these people into beggars. They're suddenly running around looking for warm introductions to... I think that sort of barrier needs to change, and I don't know how, your types of businesses need to change it, but there is definitely a barrier set up between we have the money and we'll judge you and we'll choose you, but God, we're going to make this, it's like a tough mudder just to get to our front door, and then there's a big chance we might close it in front of you.
Yeah, they call it the rite of passage.
Right. Do you think you guys could make it a bit easier? Isn't that what you're supposed to be doing?
Look, it shouldn't be easy, but there's different types of difficult. And what I mean by that is walking the streets and needing warm introductions isn't the right sort of barrier. The right sort of barrier is that you should be investor ready, and you should go through the work and effort required to make your business investable. And very few people know how to do that, and very few businesses do it well. And so when you do that, you stand out. So the barriers they're putting up aren't the right barriers, and Australia investors inherently are incredibly risk adverse. And that is frustrating, and that's holding back the country massively. So the amount of money that's going into startup is way smaller than what it should be. So if you would just do a back of the fag pack kind of calculation, our GDP is about 1/10 of the US, yet the amount of money going into startup is 1/100th of the US. Which is
and as you said, Israel and Silicon Valley, they're so far ahead of us.
Absolutely. So the companies that are coming through, there's some great companies there, but they're living on life support. They're not getting the capital they need. And even when they do raise capital, the investors here will traditionally give them enough just to keep them going. What they do over in Silicon Valley and Israel is they go, well, if I put 10 million into you, imagine what we could do. Where the investors here will go, well, $1 million will get you by, and then come back to us in 6 or 12 months when you need another $1 million or $2 million. And so you're not growing at the potential of what these companies can do, and that's holding us back heavily.
You have a bucket list.
I
Apparently,
do.
you and your wife sat down and did a bucket list. You want to share with us what's on that bucket list?
I'd have to get it out to remember all of it, but most of it is about seeing and doing things. Obviously, things from riding in a jet plane to going in a Formula One car to seeing an iceberg to the pyramids or climbing Kilimanjaro to things like that. Are most of the things on the combined bucket list. But
What's on yours?
well, that's the combined one between. There was other ones for me, like having a family, having kids, successful marriage. Those sort of things were on my list. So I'm ticking off a few of those.
You spoke about balance before, about being able to balance. I mean, you're a workaholic, I would say. You sit on that side of the fence, but you have a family that you obviously love and a great wife. So how do you maintain that balance?
Sometimes not very well, and every so often you need a good kicking to bring you back in line. So there is times when I'm trying to spend more time with the family, but you're not there when you're there, and that can always be a problem because these things are going off and around in your head, and it's not a matter of they're more important. They're not. It's just a matter of urgency. And priorities at that point in time, and every so often you need a recalibration of what is important and what is the priority, and thankfully I have a very understanding wife who does give me that shove when I need it.
If I were to ask you what your X factor is as a human, what is your X factor?
Ooh.
What drives you? What gets you up every day, even on the rubbish days, on the days when
It's tenacity, I'd say, would be my thing. It's just never give up. Doesn't matter what it is, you just got to keep going. You just got to get up every day and just keep going. So that's been the case for degrees, for study, for work, for everything I've always done. You just, whatever you start, you finish.
And we all have challenges and they make us grow. If I were to say to you, a challenging moment that maybe changed your life, other than perhaps when you were so ill, is there something else that stands out for you?
I mean, throughout the work and things I've done, there's been plenty of challenges, and co-founding Open Markets as the business prior to Capital Pitch, there were moments in there that were just so stressful. You can't learn these things out of a textbook. You can't go to university and understand this, and that's why I think investors like serial founders, because the challenges, the hurdles you have to climb over to build a business, and every business has an element of luck. They'll tell you that they were down to their last dollar and then somehow a deal came through. It's exactly what does happen every time. And I've had those challenges with that business and other times. But yeah, I've got a particular memory where I was just trying to take a couple of days break because I was exhausted, and I was up in Byron Bay, I think it was, surfing for a couple of days and just going, literally, I just driven up there, and everything I was working on was just collapsing around me. And I remember sitting on the bed, and actually I was shaking just from the pressure of everything that I was trying to get to happen that was now falling apart around me. And when it did fall apart, it was going to take out my life savings. It was going to take out the business I was setting up. It would potentially take out the exchange that I was working on. So everything I was doing, it was just because everything was cross-pollinating. So when one thing goes down, it's like a set of dominoes, just taking the next thing out. And so I spent most of the drive back from the Queensland border all the way back to Sydney on the phone, trying to sort the problems of the next steps. And there's been a few near misses.
A few near misses. We've come to the end of the interview. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us and actually explaining to us about an industry that is so mystifying at times. And I wish you best of luck with these ventures that you have. You're listening to The Dialogue. We will be back next week.